Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms where I give you a heads up about upcoming shows and which date and time they will be aired. If you go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, you can find links to the shows, MP3 files which you can download, or links to your favorite platform like iTunes, Spreaker, SoundCloud, and all other major sources. You can find information for upcoming and past talk show appearances as well as new book projects at MarlenePardo.com. You can also purchase books and merchandise there. And you can visit my author page on Amazon at Marlene Pardo Pellicer. Due to popular demand, I'm narrating my True Believer stories that I've collected throughout the years in a new series called Supernatural Storytime. You can find links at supernaturalstorytime.com. If you are into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate some of those at Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If you would like to read noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. I do want to thank you all for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good, I hope. I'm doing well. Even though you might not hear the show for a little bit because, we stagger it as far as the release on it. Right now we're in the middle of a scenario here where we're kind of like told to stay at home because of the COVID-19 scenario going on. So, I know a lot of you have asked me, we're basically, we have no excuse not to work really hard on the farm is what it boils down to. Over here down in South Florida, we've been having a little bit of dry temperatures, which is good, but at the same time, for anybody that's done forget farming, gardening, rain is so important as far as a steady supply. And even though we have a pump out back, I'm telling you, and I've said it before, the first thing I do when I wake up is look at the weather. Like today I looked, there was supposed to be a thunderstorm, and it was like, okay, thank God, a thunderstorm. We're going to get some type of rain. Guess what? It never materialized. And over here, I'm sure it's happened to you. You'll get rain a mile away, half a mile away, and nothing. And we didn't even get like a drop. We saw the thunder clouds kind of roll, and then they kept rolling along. They rolled right, no rain. So yeah, we're stuck here working hard. And we're, as far as, we've got a lot of chickens and, we've in the community here, because this is an agricultural area. So what we've done here is that we're like, selling some of the eggs, like really, usually, I sell them for people that want them for incubating, for their incubators or their broody hens. But since every once in a while, for some reason, there's a shortage that comes about. So what we've done is we offer like very inexpensive eggs for people that they are like egg lovers, like I am, and things of that nature. But yeah, we're doing well, and I hope all of you are doing well, considering everything, and we'll take it as it goes along. But right now, let's get to the good part. Let me tell you about our guest. My guest, and this gentleman's name is David Schwerin. He's Ph.D. He's the author of 3 books and dozens of articles published worldwide. His latest book he co-authored with Diana Muntz Chen. The title of it is Know Your Soul, Bring Joy to Your Life, which was published in late 2019. Now, David has studied with 2 international mystery schools for over 40 years and has received specific guidance from his higher self and soul for the last 20. Okay, and I won't get too much into the bio because, we spoke a little bit before we started taping, and there's a backstory to this, and I'm going to bring him on, help me welcome him on, and he's going to tell us the backstory of how he came to be at this point where he wrote this book. How are you doing today, David? It is great to speak to you, and most of my guests know my format, and I'm so glad that we discussed this. What is the backstory? What is that backstory that you said is led to where you're at right now, and presently with the last book you wrote, and everything that's gone on with you? What is that all about? Mm-hmm.
Happened to live across the street from me, and for some personal reasons that were going on at that time, I felt I needed some help. I really didn't know what a healer was at that time, but since she was so convenient and I was searching around, I went over and had a session with this woman, and that started me on my journey of working with healers and with channelers to learn a lot about myself. And I got to this woman who was a healer and did a lot of channeling, answered a lot of questions I had at the time, and I gained confidence in her and in the information that was being received. And shortly, I guess in the early 90s, maybe a year or two after this all started, I received guidance that I should sell my business. I was then in the investment business.
Wow.
Which sounds a little strange to some people.
I know, that's what I was going to say.
To mix investments and spirituality, but that's where I was.
Okay.
And I was suggested that I sell my business. It was a little bit scary to do that because I had been in business 25 years and was associated or identified myself as being an investment counselor.
Okay.
But after a little bit of time of thinking about it and planning and whatnot, I did sell my business and didn't really know what was to come next. But I was referred to another person who also did the same thing, healing and channeling. And again, after working with her for a little while, guidance came through that I was to write my first book. And I was a little bit shocked at that because I hadn't planned or thought about writing a book and no idea what to write it about.
Okay.
But I was told just to pay attention to my dreams and what would come through, and I would be guided. And so however it came through, I wrote the book based on applying spiritual principles to business, which are the two areas that I knew something about. And the book was published in 1998. It was called Conscious Capitalism. Okay. And about that same time, 1998, I was guided to learn about channeling, so I would do my own channeling instead of relying on others. And I was also introduced to the higher self of a woman who had a channeling school. So all this coalesced in 1998. And that's the year that I said my first book was published. And, excuse me, it was somewhat slow going at first, but after a year or two, my book was out, I got an email from a person in California, who was living in California, who I had never met, didn't know anything about, who introduced himself as a Chinese scholar. And this person said they had read my book in the library out in California, and they wanted to publish it in China. And so, I didn't know what to make of that. I didn't know this person at all. But to make a long story short, my book was published in China in 2001. Again, capitalism at that time was very new in China, and I didn't know what kind of a reception I might get, but I was invited to go over to China and speak to various audiences, academic, business, and governmental agencies, and spoke about capitalism and what I term conscious capitalism. That sometimes people might refer to that as corporate social responsibility or social responsible business. There's a lot of different names now. It's called ESG. But the idea is that you treat stakeholders equally and give them all consideration when you make a decision, instead of what was the traditional way to simply favor investors, make all your decisions as to what would benefit investors. So 2001 started a journey in China that has lasted almost 20 years. After my first trip to China in 2001, I took another one the following year, and I began to see that the Chinese people had a deep longing for spiritual connection, and had been dampened down by the authorities, but it was still there. And so I had the idea of bringing a spiritual path that I had been following to China, thinking that maybe this would be of interest to the Chinese people. So I was initially, my guidance, again, most of this is channeled material, the guidance is channeled, and I was told this wasn't the right time to do this and to just be patient. So I was, and in 2005, my next trip, my third trip to China, I was told now would be the time to start introducing this spiritual path to China, but just know that it'll take time and be patient. Now, just to backtrack a second, when I first went to China in 2001, I had the opportunity to speak to top executives in China, the political leaders, and in fact, my book was widely publicized in China. My pictures on the side of a bus, and all kinds of stuff was going on. And it wasn't too long before the Communist Party got behind the idea of conscious capitalism or social responsible business. And it was when the Communist Party gets behind something, it has legs. It takes off. And that's what happened in this case. Social responsible business, corporate social responsibility, ESG, whatever you want to call it, is now fairly widespread in China, with most companies of any size following a lot of the concepts behind the conscious capitalism. And that gave me credibility. And as a result, when I started to take the spiritual stuff into China, I didn't meet the resistance that I might otherwise have met. So I was working both sides, the spiritual and the business side, for a number of years. I got some books published in China that came from this spiritual path I was following, which is called Pathwork. And things were going along pretty well, although in China, it's never a straight path up. It's always a lot of ups and downs, and you've got to just sort of flow with things. Then I had an unusual experience in 2010, and this has nothing really to do with China, although maybe in fact it does. One of my sessions, I've been having sessions monthly approximately with my guides and with higher self and soul. And during those sessions, I can ask any questions I want about anything, and I get very forthright answers. And these sessions have been recorded, and it's been really a wonderful experience for me. I've learned an incredible amount. Guys are really being mentored during this process. So in 2010, during one of these sessions, I was told by the higher self that I had accomplished a lot of what I was meant to accomplish, most of the tasks I had. And so when that happens with all of us, when we have accomplished what we've come to accomplish, it's often time to leave, to transition, to go back to spirit. But for whatever reason, my soul had decided that I should stay, and I was going to do a reincarnation in the same body.
Okay.
Now that's not a topic that everyone is familiar with. I covered in detail in my book, Know Your Soul, Bring Joy to Your Life. And but I'll cover it real briefly, and for those who are interested in it,
Yes.
pick up a copy of the book.
Yes.
So essentially, we're all energy. That's all we are. We're spiritual beings having a physical experience, but we're really, in essence, energy. And so you can change the energy system within a body, and the line of purpose or hara line is like a hanger on which your energy system is placed. And by changing that, you change a lot of the dynamics in your life. Sometimes it's dramatic, sometimes it's a little less dramatic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a process that, in my case, took a couple of years. And different segments of my energy system were dissolved and others were replaced. So that I, in essence, really was a new person in many respects. Again, some people have it much more dramatic than I did, but in any case, it's the same process, and it takes time. And while you're going through this process, it's very tiring, and you're not exactly always in balance. But fortunately, I was getting these monthly sessions where I was told what would happen next and how it would affect me, and therefore it went fairly smoothly. As I say, I was usually tired.
Mm-hmm.
They had told me to take a nap during the day.
Okay.
So this process, as I said, lasted about 2 years, give or take. And when it was finished, I was told I had a new task, and so to speak, was sent on my way for the rest of them to continue my journey. Then, and I did continue this. I continued going to China. As I said, I've taken, or maybe I didn't say it, I've taken 9 trips to China in the last 18, 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I continued that work. I had written a second book called Conscious Globalism in 2005. And then around 2015, I was told that Archangel Michael, who works with Diana Min Chen, who was co-author of my Know Your Soul book, became a guide for me. And he started a course for a number of people to help them connect more closely with their soul.
Okay.
So I've been taking that course for the last 5 years. And in 2018, towards the end of 2018, Archangel Michael asked Diana and I to write this soul book.
Okay.
And he gave us material. Some of the material is never, I don't think anyone ever is aware of it. It's new material. Some maybe have some, may be familiar with some parts, but probably not the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the book was published in a few months ago, really, about 4 or 5 months ago.
Okay.
And it does a lot of things. One, it's a very short book, but it has has a lot in it, and it tells you, it describes the origin, purpose, and structure of the soul, which is material that was given to us by Archangel Michael. And there's a lot of personal experiences that both Diana and I, particularly me, have had in working with the spirit world. I won't at this time at least go through all the types of experiences, but I think you'll find them quite informative and helpful.
Okay.
And so that's, things are pretty much up to date where I am. We're now out trying to make this book available widely, which is what we were told we should do, and I think people who read it, for some people it's challenging, but for others it's very enlightening, and I think it's something that it really is important because it helps us know who we are and what we're here for, which is simple as that sounds to say. It's something most people don't know.
Yes.
And quite honestly, because we don't know it, we've created a lot of problems in this world. Mm-hmm. And the crisis we're going through now is an attempt to shake us up and wake us up.
Right.
And reevaluate what's going on in our life and what's important. What are our values? What are our priorities?
Exactly.
So knowing who you are, as I said, our new book will tell you that in great detail. It's important for everybody.
David,
so let me stop there.
No. Let me ask you something, because I think it's so interesting that you said that your background was investments. In other words, something totally divorced from this field, if you want to look at it initially. When you got introduced into channeling, everything that you described at the beginning, were you resistant, or did you have an aha moment?
Yeah, no, I was skeptical.
Okay.
And it was only because that I had the opportunity to see that the results or the guidance I was receiving was accurate and was helpful, which gradually eroded my skepticism.
Okay.
So it's personal experiences really that are key to going full hog on this type of material.
Right, so it was a process for you, and you allowed the process to continue, in other words. Because there's people sometimes that they're skeptical and they just shut everything down and they don't care, but you allowed it to, let the process play out, but it sounds like almost with a skeptical point of view until it, little by little, I imagine, of course, it's, sometimes I imagine it's certain things that happen that maybe you understood on a conscious level that overcame your own skepticism, in other words. But sometimes as skeptics, we can be the worst. We have very high standards depending on because I know for myself, my personality is when I'm playing the part of the skeptic, I have a very high bar, to say, to overcome, because when you're coming from something like this, nobody wants to be, whether it's led astray or you just it fits in with your personality when you want to know, if I believe this, there's validity to it. And then you go on to the next step, whatever, that next step is.
Well, as I said, it's because gradually over a period of time, at least a few years, I saw that when I had a problem and asked for help,
right,
I was given help, given guidance, told what to do, and that solved the problem. So it's easy to overcome skepticism when you see results, that they work.
Now you mentioned something that you weren't channeling originally. How was that? Was somebody channeling and giving you a message?
Yes.
Okay.
For the first half a dozen years or more, I was information was channeled for me,
I see.
and that's the information that proved accurate and helped me get over my skepticism.
Okay. How was it when you decided to channel yourself?
Well,
How was that like?
It's challenging.
Okay.
When you channel, you have to have a lot of trust, because you don't know what the next word is going to come out of your mouth.
Okay.
And it could make you look like a fool. And so it takes a lot of experience and a lot of trust to be able to do that. And it also, when you're first learning channeling, what I've been told is it takes a lifetime to learn channeling.
Okay.
It's like any other skill. It takes repeated experience. And so I don't consider myself to be an expert at channeling at this point. I'm still learning.
Okay.
And it's never perfect.
Okay.
Even those that are excellent channels and very experienced channels who've been doing this for many lifetimes,
Right.
They still get things wrong. So it's not a perfect situation, but you can receive wonderful guidance from it.
Do you channel only for yourself, or do you channel and offer guidance to other people?
Generally, I do it for myself. I have done it for others, but I guess when I build my confidence up to the point where I'm as good as my teacher, then I'll be happy to channel for others. But while I'm still learning, I've done it, but not to a large extent.
Now, let me ask you: when channeling, have you ever had a surprise, like that you've channeled something that you're surprised at what the message is, even though you're channeling for yourself?
Yeah, sure. And then that is the challenge.
Okay.
Is to be able to bring through the information without stopping the flow because you're startled with some information.
Okay.
And that's not easy.
Okay. What is it? Because what do you think that as humans we try to second guess things or overanalyze them?
I mean, why? I'm not sure what the question is.
Well, do you think that when, let's say, and I'm not sure exactly the process that you do when you channel, and I'm thinking where most of us sometimes, like you said, are kind of hesitant because sometimes we want to overanalyze instead of, like, imagine letting go and channeling.
Right.
We kind of want to analyze the information. Like you said, am I going to say something? What am I going to say? Or what, and because I can imagine for most people that puts the brakes on, like, letting information flow through.
That's true. That's why trust is, that's an important, very important lesson, was an important lesson. It still is an important lesson for me. And it's one of the reasons why I think I was guided to learn channeling, to increase my level of trust. And quite honestly, my whole journey through China has been a journey of trust, because in China you never know what's going to happen. It's not, it's a different culture, different ways of doing things, and they do things at the last minute. I've taken trips to China not knowing who I was going to talk to or if I'd be able to talk to anybody.
Okay.
And it's turned out that on some of those trips I had the most wonderful reception, but I went there thinking maybe a waste of time. So you have to trust that those that the spirit world who is working with you will take care of things, and that requires trust.
Right. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Now, and I know because a lot of people sometimes think of channeling, or something like that as being more of a spiritual practice or spiritual assistance. For since like you described, you usually channel for yourself. Could you, as far as practical assistance, something that you could say, this was something that I actually put to work, to use, in other words, outside of maybe a spiritual teaching or development for yourself?
Yeah. Well, all the information I get is practical.
Okay.
If something is spiritual, it has to be practical. If it's not practical, it's not spiritual.
Okay.
That's a concept maybe one doesn't agree with, but I found it to be true. Now, the guide that I've been working with, my main guide, is by the name of Hermes.
Okay.
Some people are familiar with that name, some aren't. Hermes lived in ancient Egypt and Greece and in that area. So he, he is a font of wisdom, and when I channel him, I can come up with some that startles me or surprises me.
Okay. And is that, would you say, is that your only guide that you channel, or is he just?
Well, he's my main guide.
He's your main
one. Yeah, I've channeled. All my guides have done. I guess they want practice on their side too. So I've done it. I think for all of them, and some are clearer than others. One of my guides is extraterrestrial.
Okay.
And it's a wonderful, it's a great humor, and he'd come here, and he came sort of after a number of years, and he's here, as are many from different places in the universe to help us through the period. That's why he's here. He's an advanced soul, and we've had a good relationship.
Let me ask you, when you have a new guide, do you have an existing one introduce this new guide, or how does that work for you when you start working with a new guide?
I generally am just told there's a new guide that's working with you. Okay. And they come and go sometimes, depending on, some of them have different skills, and some of them have different interests. Okay. And so, some of them have stayed with me for as long as I know. Others have fairly recent. Like, for instance, when I was working in China with this path work, the spiritual path, my guide is somebody who's very familiar with that material.
I see.
So it varies.
Right. So, in other words, there's a recognition of what's going on in your, how can I say, your regular life as far as what your activities are. Absolutely,
and they're here to help facilitate the accomplishment of a specific task. So, in this case, I was given the task to introduce a couple of ideas to China. One was the social responsible business. One was path work, and guides are drawn to me or come to me who have knowledge and interest in this area, and they open up and make connections that I couldn't otherwise make.
And in the book, in this last book that you wrote, does it include for people that want to follow this path? Is it just anecdotes of what's happened for you personally, or do you offer some type of guidance for somebody that wants to do this?
Yeah, there's a lot in here. It includes how to connect to your soul. And this is again given to us by Archangel Michael. A process for connecting to your soul for anybody who wants to do that. There's a lot of material about the soul and about our how we interact with the soul and how the soul guides us, and or what often happens, the soul has an agenda. We're here. We're the representative of our soul. I'm the ambassador, representative.
Mm-hmm.
So the soul has an agenda, and it would like us to follow what it wants, obviously.
Yes.
But we have free will, so we can either go along, or we can thwart the soul. We can do something other than what we're guided to do. And generally, when we're asked to do something, some fear comes up.
Yes.
Because the soul is trying to stretch us, trying to get us to do new things and learn new things.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, from a personality level, that's a little scary, what we might be asked to do. Now, the object is to surrender to your soul. Yes. Surrender and follow what you're being guided to do. Okay. But if we thwart that, if we don't listen because of fear or whatever reason, mm-hmm. and the soul has some tools in its toolbox, you might say, okay. to help us to come around to its way of thinking. And so it uses things such as relationship issues or health issues, okay. to help us to be more compliant, to surrender, to accept and trust. And so I can give you a story about that if you want.
Yes, of course. Yes, absolutely.
So I think you're from Florida, so you may be more familiar with this than most people, but there's a game called pickleball. You ever hear of that?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Pickleball.
No.
Okay.
What is that?
It's big in Southwest Florida.
Okay.
It's a relatively new game. Mm-hmm. It's similar in some ways to tennis. Okay. Has a racket, solid racket. There's a net, a court, and you hit the ball back and forth, just like you would in tennis. It's a little slower game than tennis. It can be played quite quickly, actually. So anyway, I was playing pickleball one day, and I was standing about mid-court, waiting for the ball to be hit towards me, and it was hit a little bit to my left and behind me. So I started to back up to try and retrieve the ball. And before I knew it, I was moving backwards, and I couldn't stop my momentum. I was, I'm on a flat surface, mm-hmm. and by all accounts, I should have been able to stop within a reasonable period of time, but I couldn't. I mean, I could think at the time, why can't I stop? Well, unfortunately, there was a concrete wall about 15 yards behind me. Okay. And before I knew it, since I couldn't stop, voluntarily, the wall stopped me. Oh. And I fell to the ground and had some blood coming from the top of my head, and my hand was limp. And to make a long story short, I was rushed to the hospital, and they gave me an X-ray, and the doctor came out and said, "Yeah, you broke your wrist in 3 places, mm-hmm. and you need stitches in your head." And so, the whole experience was strange to me because I was trying to stop and I couldn't, and I had enough space and time to do it under any normal circumstances. Okay. So about a day or two later, I had a regularly scheduled session with my guides, mm-hmm. and so I said, "Well, I want to ask about this." I mean, I asked about everything, and so this was just normal for me. Mm-hmm. But I said, "Now I want to understand what the hell happened." And so the session began, and I started to explain what had happened to me, and of course, my guides know exactly what happened. I start telling them because everything we do and think is known by our guides. But anyway, the guide stopped me and said, "Well, here's the situation. This was no accident. In between your soul and your body, and so this accident, although it wasn't an accident, the breaking of the hand. And lessons included acceptance. I have to accept that, that this is something that was needed to happen, and trust, and reception. I have to be more receptive, because with a broken wrist, I had to rely on others to help me. With eating, with getting dressed, getting washed, etc. And we all have an imbalance, or most of us have an imbalance between being receptive and being giving.
Sure. And
one is stronger than the other usually.
Yes.
And so I was being shown that it's easier for me to give than receive. And so I was trying to bring this back into balance. And this experience meant to help me to make that transition. And so this happens all the time with all of us. We don't recognize it. We have.
David, before looking back in hindsight, before you had that accident, do you think that there were hints being dropped that, in other words, they resorted to you being injured because they had tried to guide you in that direction and you were resistant?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think I had some previous opportunities to get the message, and I hadn't gotten it. So each time you don't get it, they ratchet it up a little bit.
Right.
Until.
Okay, so in other words, this was like, okay, he's not paying attention, so we have to take the gloves off. In other words.
Right. Exactly.
Now,
and that's what's happening in the world. We haven't listened to the fact that there's rampant ecological degradation, that there's inequality that's getting out of hand, that there's levels of debt and deficits that are unsustainable. All this is unsustainable, and therefore we have to be waking up. We have to be shaken up to relook at this. It makes sense. Are we, what's wrong here?
Okay.
What do we need to change? What beliefs? What behaviors? And so it's no accident that a crisis, whatever the form the crisis takes,
yes,
is a natural event that is purposeful, and we need to pay attention to.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and I understand perfectly what you're saying. Sometimes it's almost like similar to, okay, well, we've got to take it to this level because otherwise nobody's paying attention, kind of thing. Right. Yeah. David, let me ask you, and I don't know if part of your belief system is in reincarnation or not, but do your guides follow you through different lifetimes, or are they? Well,
let me respond to that. I do believe in it, and I have asked my guides for many times about whether I've had a past life with this person or that person. And people come into my life if I want to know why they're in my life. But what am I here with them to learn?
Right.
And I'll ask them, and they always tell me, and they tell me straight out, and it always makes sense. It makes sense. Okay, I see that. Their personality, my personality, would create this situation. So it's really helped me to connect cause and effect, and that's the purpose. That's why you might be told about your past life, because if it helps you to understand what's going on in your life currently. So,
right.
To answer your question, yes, I believe in it, and we write about it in the book. There is no death.
Okay.
And we go through in detail about how the process of dying and how it goes, and what happens when you do leave your body. All that is in the book in some detail.
Okay. One thing I wanted to ask you about, which I thought was very interesting, was when you said that you channeled basically an entity that's non-human. In other words, for lack of a better word, an extraterrestrial.
Hmm.
How was that for you? Did you, because you were channeling, you were accepting, or at that point did you balk? How was that for you when the first time that you
Well,
recognized this was not the maybe what, for lack of a better word, a human entity or a human spirit or guide?
well, I was told ahead of time
Oh, okay.
his name is Iraq,
Okay.
and I think I've had some past life experiences with him,
Okay.
and so I was told about it ahead of time that he was here and would be one of my guides, and he I forget exactly how it went, but I think he asked to to channel some stuff with me, and I think actually some of my clearest channeling was with him.
Okay.
A wonderful, wonderful personality, and very enlightened, very advanced being, and so that's been a wonderful connection.
And as far as and I guess I'm thinking as far as, we think of ourselves as humans with a human condition. Um is he, I guess this, you wouldn't know, but um have they been around for a long time? I mean, observing us, in other words, being cognizant of our daily lives, and then
They've been here. They've
the
been here for a long time. I mean, if
from
you
a
go
long
back
time.
to you go back to ancient Egypt, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody wonders how some of those how the pyramids were built and things of that sort.
Okay.
It's through help of extraterrestrials who are more advanced than we are. We're a fairly young civilization,
Okay.
and
So
so we need help from those who are ahead of us and know a lot more.
right, and I was going to ask you. That was my next question. Are they involved in helping us, or is it more, like the Star Trek, the Prime Directive? We observe, but we don't intervene. In other words, we got to let them figure it out. Uh,
Well, we have they honor our free will.
okay.
So first of all, if you have no interest in this, you won't be attracted. They won't be attracted to you. If
Mm-hmm.
you um, and if you resist, then they won't continue the process. It's only if you really want it and you're open to it
Okay.
um, that the connection will be made.
Okay. And I mean, because this, in other words, so for all you know, there's still guides that you haven't met. It sounds like you have, like you said, some that will always be with you or that have been with you. And then there's some that come and go depending on what's going on in your
But,
life, as far as
right,
maybe.
and they all have different specialties or skills. So,
Okay.
some will come like for instance, when you're writing a book,
Mm-hmm.
there's some that are have expertise in that area. Hermes um, has written millions of I mean a lot of books, and that's one of his specialties. But different people they need help in different areas, and so the guide that will be able to facilitate that will be drawn to you.
Okay. And because I know there's so many people sometimes that want to know what their purpose in life is. Like that they want to feel like they've fulfilled a purpose, and they seem to kind of be adrift. Um, have there been times, and I imagine where, let's say somebody channels for them, as an example, where they get into this conversation and the purpose that they're basically told is not what they thought it was going to be? That, like, they think, okay, this is where my interest, or this is where I think I'm talented, but then it really turns out that their true purpose might be similar, but sometimes is not. Have you ever
Right.
I don't know, either personally had that experience or witnessed anybody, basically, for lack of a better word, discovering? a purpose for themselves that really wasn't either what they thought it
Well,
was going to be?
I have had too much experience other than my own experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very fortunate that because I had this connection, and
Okay.
I have this, and for 22 years I've had this monthly discussion with Spirit,
Mm-hmm.
just like it's a discussion just like we're having,
Right.
that my purpose was clear,
Okay.
and I didn't have a long period where I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing.
Okay.
But the key to figuring it out, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
is to look at how fulfilled you feel.
Yes.
If your life is really fulfilled and harmonious and things are going well, you are likely on your right track. If your life is not fulfilled and you don't feel comfortable, it's likely that you need to look a little further to find what your true purpose is.
David, have your guides ever, because it sounds almost like you have a certain schedule where you channel with your guides, have they ever come through all of a sudden like that there's something that they have to tell you, like, we can't wait till maybe when you were planning to channel? Have you ever had that
Yeah.
experience?
Well, because I do this monthly,
Mm-hmm.
there's no really need. I mean, they know that they have an opportunity every month to get the information, and I don't think there's been any need to get something
Okay.
more frequently than that.
Okay. So in
But
other words,
you know,
you've never had this, and I understand exactly what you're saying, but you've never had that situation where you feel, okay, whether it's a presentiment, intuition, or something that you say, I can't wait for the next time I'm planning to channel.
well, I can connect with them and find out.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that I have, although I can't think of a specific example.
Okay.
So they're available. They're there. They're there for you. They're there, and they're helping. They want to help you, and so the connection will be made. It may not be the way you expect it to be made.
Okay.
The information, but you can get. A lot of people get it in their dreams. Your subconscious. So you just have to be aware of what you're getting and try and make sense out of it.
Right. And I mean, again, I've spoken sometimes to many people who are, they want it on a conscious level. They want the guidance, but then subconsciously they're very resistant to it. Part of it being what you described earlier: resistance to change, resistance to what if that's, how am I, in other words, they extrapolate it in ways, and as human beings we're very resistant to change. So it's almost like they want it but they don't want it. They hold themselves back.
Yeah, remember, we have free will. So
Yes.
if there is some resistance there, nothing's going to be forced upon somebody.
Oh, no.
So,
In other words, but sometimes it's almost like, but I guess what I'm saying is that sometimes we don't recognize our own resistance. In other words,
well, that's true.
we're consciously, we're thinking we want it, but then we kind of sabotage
right
that effort.
That happens, and so you have to be more attentive to what's going on and what your motives are, and what your what's happening underneath the surface.
Okay.
And sometimes that's not easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want this stuff, Spirit wants to help you do it. And this is a way the Spirit can help you evolve, help speed your evolution. which is the reason why that reincarnation in the same body that I did.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to speed somebody's evolution. They don't have to leave the body and then come back again.
Right. Okay.
They can accelerate their evolution, and in coming years, this will be more commonplace because again, spirit wants to speed up the process.
Okay. Now let me ask you for somebody, because it sounds like first you contacted somebody who sounds like was a teacher for you, and then channeled for you. If somebody wants to do this, I mean, should they go about this? Do you explain that in your book? If they want to meet somebody that's going to introduce them to this path, and
the question is how do you?
Right. In other words, somebody that wants to do similar to what you described. You visited somebody, they received guidance from this person. In other words, it sounds like there was a few years that went by before you attempted to channel yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That you were receiving messages from somebody else. And the reason why I ask this, that for some people, sometimes there's also a trust factor. Is there, in your book, do you describe a method, or how does the person start on this road, in other words?
Yeah, we have actually a meditation that Archangel Michael gave us, dictated to us.
Oh, okay.
For making these connections.
Okay.
But if you really want this type of thing,
mm-hmm.
and you pray for it and set an intention,
yes,
you're more than likely to get what you want because Spirit wants us too.
Right. Okay.
And so it's easier than you might think.
Right. What's that saying about when the student is ready, the teacher will appear,
right.
And right. And in other words, I guess be open, which is sometimes people don't realize that for some people, despite what they might think, it's easier said than done, especially
mm-hmm.
when we're talking something as important as your spiritual / soul, things of this nature. Sometimes that many times we put on the back burner because introspection sometimes is a difficult thing to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Especially mm-hmm. since everybody's trying to multitask all the time, unfortunately.
Right. Well, you got to quiet down
mm-hmm.
and put what's important, make it a priority.
Yes.
And those are important prerequisites.
Absolutely.
But
yes.
if you do that, I think you're likely to be successful.
Yes, set it aside.
Spirit wants the same thing. Spirit wants to help us.
Yes, and that's one of the most important things that sometimes we think it's an uphill kind of endeavor, when in reality it's not as uphill or as steep as we think or want to believe. And I want to say sometimes there's there's this idea that spiritual awakening has got to be really difficult, and how can I say that it's wrenching? And I think that sometimes that's not the case. Yes,
it takes some discipline,
mm-hmm.
and it takes an intention,
right,
and a focus. But if you have that, then it'll come reasonably easily.
Okay, right. But I'm sure also there's got to be some type of agreement within you that you yourself realize, even if I have to do certain things, whether it's be still or set a time aside, that there's something on a soul level that is in agreement with this, like you said, because of the free will that's always recognized for each individual person.
Right. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. And at the pace that the person's ready for, in other words.
Right. But again, what's going on today
mm-hmm.
is that we're forced to stay in our houses in those cases, and
yes,
and cut back all the things we're multitasking doing.
mm-hmm.
And so there's a reason for that, and it's forcing us to be introspective and to slow down and to focus and to look at our beliefs and see which ones are accurate and which ones aren't.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
What's happening today is important and purposeful.
Yes. I think a lot of people are having that, whether it's voluntary or kind of in a way forced, because like of that introspection, or just whatever the case might be. I think a lot of people are doing that self-examination
Mm-hmm.
and determining that. And I hate to say it, sometimes even born out of fear because of what's happened or happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Almost like in a similar way of what you described when you had that accident and you went into the wall. That, as you described it, it's almost like a similar thing where you can't ignore it. It's difficult to
Mm-hmm.
ignore. How can you? And it's just happening on a very large scale, an overall
Right.
huge, well, worldwide scale.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, David, I wanted to thank you so much for joining us tonight. Let me ask you for, I'm going to have a link to your website on the credits of the show, but for my podcast listeners, what is your website address?
My website is www.consciousthinking.
Okay.
consciousthinking.com.
.com. Okay. I know you just said that you published this last book at the end of 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Are you working on any new projects or anything now for this year, next year?
Well, I'm trying to get this book out into the world because a lot of the information in there is needed.
Yes.
And so that's been a focus for me. While I'm doing that, I'm still doing some stuff in China, and I write a blog for the Times of India that people might be interested in. It has a lot of good material on it. It's called, the website for Times of India is called Speaking Tree.
Okay.
Speakingtree.in for India.
Okay, exactly.
And then put /David-Schwerin blogs, and I have about close to 100 things I've written about spirituality, business, the whole ball of wax, politics.
Oh, really? Fantastic. Let me ask, just in case, do you have links from your website if anybody wanted to jump over to this blog, or do they have to go directly to it?
On my website is a link to this blog.
I see. Perfect. Which is maybe for some people it'll be easier for them to just jump over from a link, from a hyperlink.
Right.
Again, David, thank you so very much, and I want to wish you the best of luck for this year and the coming years, and especially now for the launch of this book.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.
Wow. Food for thought. And you know what's funny? That when I contacted David to come on the show, there was nothing on the horizon, nothing having to do with what's going on with COVID-19, with the relationship with China, nothing. This was strictly my interest was in the nature of especially his last book, of channeling and, self-knowledge, spiritual self-knowledge. Because basically, that saying, to thine own self be true. It's almost part of it is that. And of course, that is something so individual. But sometimes people want to compare themselves to other people, and everybody's different. The mechanics of their mind, their soul, their experience, their life experiences, what they're ready for, emotionally, spiritually. Everybody's like, you cannot replicate one thing for one person and expect the same at another. And there's people, when they start doing spiritual work, that sometimes for years they kind of go like at a snail's pace, because maybe they're working something through, and then they go through this thing of where they flow, and it slows down. It depends. A lot of it depends on our individual makeup on all levels. And find that because I've spoken to a lot of people that, like I said, they go through that. I want to find my purpose. They want to develop themselves spiritually. They find, I've been paying too much attention to the physical. When I mean the physical, I mean exactly what we described. Too much multitasking, too much of the outside and not enough on the inside. And sometimes one of two things. Either they really never have thought it's important, or they think it's important, but it's just I never had enough time for it. Like, my God. And you would think, even setting aside time, some people, it depends on whether their personality is that they're driven. Some people just don't have the time because there's things going on in their life. They have a family, or they have a job that demands, or both. Even a few extra minutes for something along those lines, just can't wedge it in. And the truth is, despite how much they think it's important, they don't make it important, because we all know perfectly well that when something is really important to you, you make time for it, whatever the circumstances are. So again, a lot of people have that moment where they make that decision either voluntarily, or sometimes something happens to them health-wise, or they have that, how can I tell, the epiphany, they have an experience. In his case, which we don't know, but they start talking to somebody and they're skeptical. And then conversations take place where that skepticism, little by little, is eroded. And what he described, which is, I think, very important, where the feelings that you get from it are positive. Okay? Are positive. Because I absolutely agree with what he's saying. Our spiritual development is to help us. It's not to hinder us or make us feel bad. It might make us feel uncomfortable sometimes. There's a big difference between feeling uncomfortable, especially if we have to trust or do something that we're not, like, oh my, like when you go the first day to a new job, that you're like, that's different from feeling bad. Some spiritual work is not supposed to make you feel bad or fearful or, oh my God, this is a big mistake. No, sometimes you have to trust, but how can I say, there's something in you that feels better for what you're doing. And it develops you. It develops you. Again, a little bit like when you go to the gym, the first few times, the next day you're walking around like going, oh my God. You're resistant, you're kind of in pain, you have to force yourself, and then all of a sudden there comes a point where you start seeing the benefits of it, and you're not resistance. The resistance starts to fade away. And there's a part of you that recognizes that this is good for you. You feel good, your soul feels good spiritually. And you start looking forward, like he was describing, maybe to those moments when you still yourself. And some people look at it, meditation. Other people see it as moments of prayer. Because, let's face it, sometimes it seems that, and like I said, I've had conversations with people where which is why I asked them, they really want to have that introspection, whether it's what's called the higher self or a guide or whatever. But they're afraid of that they're fooling themselves. Like, is this real? And I'm going to give you, for instance, the same thing. When I would do regression hypnosis for reincarnation with people, and people were very resistant because they were thinking, am I making this up? What is this? Whatever is going on. And especially with clients who had never done hypnosis or anything like that. As a matter of fact, most of my regression, I would tell them you need to come back at least twice, especially if they've never had experiences with hypnosis, because even the most unanalytical person always tries to second guess themselves as to, oh, am I making this all up? Is this all in my head? And I say, okay, what's the worst? Just let go. Let go. It's almost like, okay, you go now and you go to the theater and you're going to go see some, totally way out, movie, storyline that's like, come on. But you suspend your disbelief and you enjoy it. And there's a part of you that has to let go, suspend your disbelief. In other words, see where it takes you. Nothing bad is going to happen. Okay? And I think sometimes when we do that is when you start getting feedback about something that rings true inside of you, similar to what he was describing, where the feedback you get or the advice that you're getting from this higher self. As a matter of fact, I did do some hypnosis, which were not necessarily regression, which were to help the person meet their higher selves. And it was a process. It was a process to help this person have that conversation. And it's tailored a certain way so that your mind is accepting of it. Almost like a story. You know when somebody's telling you a story and you follow along and there's like not a build-up, but there's a gradual introduction of things so that your mind doesn't go, what? This is like, no. And all of a sudden, but yeah, I've done that type of hypnosis work. And some people, like I said, would have an aha moment right then and there. Some people were really surprised to see your higher self is supposed to be you, a higher form of you, which guides you in the sense of knowing you without all the junk, almost like if you say, this is my own best friend, this is the person, the you without the doubts, the lack of confidence, that self-talk, negative self-talk that we give. Almost like if you want to be your own best friend, but this is the you that's not held back by messages that we've gotten since we were kids. And then, besides that, then we have our guides. And I mean, I did hypnosis sessions with people to meet their guides, and you'd be surprised who would come out to be their guides. They were very surprised, again, because people have sometimes preconceived ideas of who their guide is going to be or what. And then other people were not surprised. They'd be like, man, I've dreamt of this person or this figure or of things of this nature. It's extraordinary sometimes. And again, I've had people say, well, I want to believe this is my guide, but how do I know this is just not something that I like, I dreamt up, like my imagination just whoosh. I said, I'll tell you what, your guide is never going to ask you to do something which you think is wrong, which is bad, which is going to make you feel bad or fearful or anything of that nature. It just does not work. They might tell you something like what David described, where sounds like he was involved in investments and he was given advice to let that go and sell his business. And there's times that things that you're told to do are scary. And for some people it's different. Some people jump on the bandwagon. Depends also on the trust factor. Some people are like, oh, I need to really think about this because they're like, they've got their financial concerns like, do I trust myself enough? Other people, it's slow and it's gradual. But and I guess what I'm saying is, there's never a moment where you say, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds great, but I don't know if I'm ready. They're kind of patient with you. It's not like, okay, you didn't follow our instructions. It's not going to happen that way. Okay, the idea is to move you along a certain path to help you achieve or develop yourself spiritually. And again, everybody's different. Everybody's different. That's why not everybody's walking around enlightened, because everybody's at a different level. Everybody's had working out different things. And there's the school of thought in reincarnation that you are surrounded more or less with the same people from other lifetimes, and you still are working out certain things with certain individuals. I'm sure there's new people that come into the mix and others that don't need to be around anymore. But the idea is that it's almost like you're the only student. Don't worry about it. It's not like the teacher's going to say, hey, you're holding up the class. Hurry up. No, you are that one student as far as your soul development is concerned, whether it's with your higher self and with guides and whatever that you using to develop yourself. That's it. It's just you. You're not being, how can I say, compared to, well, so and so is doing so well. How come you're not? Haven't you ever heard, that conversation where parents have, well, little Johnny or little Betty or whoever, your brother, your sister, your cousin, they're doing so well. Why can't you? Don't worry about that. That's not how it works. It's like nobody's gonna come and use the measurement yardstick like, why aren't you? And yeah, there are times that certain things happen where and here I'm gonna go down the different and everybody's different. I'm talking for myself only. I personally don't think that negative things happened to get you to pay attention. They don't. They just don't. They just don't. Because I've heard of people, things happening to them, and they start questioning, oh, that this bad thing happened. I fell and I broke my leg. Whatever. This is just a for instance. What am I missing? And it's like, maybe you're not missing anything. Maybe you just fell down and broke your leg. I mean, it happens. In other words, not everything is going to be tied into like, hey, you were missing there's something you're resistant to that you're just like, and this is the only way we're going to get you. So we're going to get you a broken leg. So now that you can't get out of bed and you're going to be more introspective and meditative. No, I personally don't think that. That's not my personal belief. Why? Because I think sometimes they sometimes, how the tapping on the shoulder, trying to get your attention. Yes, I do believe that happens. And sometimes people, it goes from intuition, ignoring your intuition, even having dreams, okay, ignoring, that head in the sand kind of deal. I know that some people believe that sometimes we even develop physical illness in our bodies when we refuse to listen to something that needs to be expressed. Now, my point being, I believe that usually happens when there's been trauma for that person and they've not dealt with it. They haven't recognized it. They haven't worked out spiritual, physically, mentally. They kind of have forgotten about it consciously, or they don't deal with it. And that trauma will surface in the body. sooner or later, depending on what happened. But as far as spiritual growth, I think there's that free will part. That, in other words, you don't get punished for using your free will and sometimes being scared or ignoring stuff, because it's almost like that moment has to be right for you to say, how can I say, do it, even though you're scared, not because something happened to you. And hey, now we got your attention. No, not for spiritual development, because I think that there's that higher you, that there's a timing in it. And here's Marlene's aha moment. Everybody always thinks that you have that moment, that epiphany, that woo, I get it, the light bulb, after something bad happens, or a health crisis, or something. In some cases, you're getting older, whatever. For some people, yes, but you know what? There's a lot of people when that awakening, that total awakening, or that total surrender comes about, I want to say, in the most commonplace ways. That there's a something that just happens, that it's been happening, it's gradual, and then it just flowers. Okay, it flowers. If you want to think of a flowering bush, let's say a rose, whatever, let's use the rose, whatever, it's an example. And you plant it, and it grows, and it's it's not flowering, but it's growing, and it's flourishing. And then one day it actually flowers. That flowers, but there's no trauma, there's no crisis, there's no moment of something horrible happening that forces you to confront and have that spiritual awakening. There's a lot of times that's not the way it happens. Okay, sometimes it's an acknowledgement that surrender has always been there and finally culminates. Little by little, this thing here, this thing there. Sometimes it's even being thankful for the good things you have, which brings you to that moment of that things are good, that spirit is there to help me, that I might not have all the answers. I hope I'm doing my purpose in life and I'm figuring it out as I go, and that you give yourself a certain, how can I say it? A certain amount of trust that you're going to figure it out. And it's a process. I don't always think that those things come about because of, how sometimes it's portrayed. I mean, I've heard people talk about it as like the left hand of God, something horrible happens. Or, they just wake up and there's a lot of people. And I think some people, they're almost expectant that it's going to be a thunderclap and it's like one day you wake up and you're like, you know what? I feel really good, or this place my soul feels is, there's a contentedness there. There's a growth there, but it doesn't have to be something monumental. It's something little by little that fills in part of who I am. Imperfect, but that there's a communication between your mind, your conscious mind, and your soul. Whether you want to go into and do something along the lines with channeling your guides, because let's face it, for you to, I guess, to trust is the best word I can think of, to trust in the channeling experience, especially if you're thinking, I'm going to be channeling someone that's not me, there has to be a degree of trust. There has to be. There has to be. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But, in other words, I agree with him that channeling, if, and there's a big if it's right for you, is something that you need to work on yourself first before you ever go down that road, if you ever go down that road, because that's not the answer for everybody. Okay? And some people don't need it. Some people, there's an inner knowing. There's a feeling that they get inside of them that, let's say they're going to make a decision on something, or they're not sure about something, and they pray about it, or they consult or meditate, whatever your thing is, that you're like, I need to figure this out, and I need to make a decision. And maybe I've done all the research, if you want to look at it, research. I've looked at everything that I could, but I need to make a decision. And I don't want to make a mistake, but what do? And they go and they do introspection. They already went through that. And they have this knowing that after a while, by the way, you get it. You get it. When you know this is the right thing. There's something in you that says, wow, this is the right decision. I don't have a guarantee. Because if you want a guarantee, you'd never do anything. But I feel like this is the right decision. And you do it. And by the way, sometimes right decisions, sometimes things go sideways and you think, boy, talk about not the right decision. But you'd be surprised. Sometimes what appears to be, oh, what a mess up, that was horrible, leads you down a path that does end up being the right thing. And the only way you were going to get there was making a decision you thought was good, which turned out to be bad, and takes you down a path of experiences, meeting somebody, people, something that it's only sometimes, as a matter of fact, years later, that you look back and you go, wow, you know what? If I would never have made that decision, which I thought was great at the time, and then it's turned out that it sucked. If I hadn't done that, if I didn't have gone through that rough patch, I wouldn't have gotten to where I'm at now, that I'm happy about. Sometimes that's the way it works, and sometimes no. Sometimes it's the right decision and it flows. And how can I say, the point from point A to point B is in a straight line, and sometimes it goes like this and detours around, and everybody's different. In other words, you got to trust that where spirit takes you, where your soul takes you, where God takes you, where the divine, however you want to look at it, is what maybe you need or what you're ready for at that moment. And again, the reason why I say this is I talk to people, say, oh man, there's so many people there that they know their purpose of life. They know where they're going. They know what they want. They know how to get there. And it's like, yeah, maybe. Or maybe they're really good at pretending. But stop doing that comparison thing. Stop doing that comparison thing. Because everybody's on a different time schedule. And there's people sometimes that you see them zooming through and you're like, man, they know where they're going. And then you catch up with them a couple years later and they've hit a brick wall. Because life kind of does that to you sometimes. So everybody does in spurts and starts, slower, faster, depending on what's going on. So don't do the comparison. Because everybody's on their own individual path. But anyway, guys, I hope you like this interview with David. I urge you to visit his website. He sounds like he's got some very interesting books and his blog. And again, I want to thank you all for being part of my audience. Please subscribe. Hit the like button wherever you find us. Don't forget, you can find any of my books on Amazon or links on my website, marlenepardo.com or miamighostchronicles.com. Again, it's interesting times that we live in. Very interesting times. Take care.